La primera contienda
The
electoral
first
desde que Donald Trump
election since
llegó a
Donald
la
Trump
Casa Blanca se
reached the
convirtió
White
en
House
plebiscito
became
sobre la
a
gestión
plebiscite
del
on
magnate presidente de Estados Unidos. Entre
amendment
la
of Donald
polarización
Trump
política sin
between
precedentes y una fuerte
unprecedented
campaña,
political
las elecciones de medio
polarization,
término
a
devinieron
strong
en verdadera
campaign,
prueba de
and the
fuego
elections of
para
January.
republicanos y para demócratas. Los primeros pusieron
First,
los demócratas pusieron fin
the
a 8
Democrats
años de
ended
mayoría
8 years
republicana
of
en la Cámara de
Republican
Representantes y
majority
los
in the
republicanos
House of
mantuvieron el control
Representatives, and the
del Senado. Ambos
Republicans,
bandos se atribuyen el triunfo. Según Trump, fue una gran
according
victoria
to
para
Trump,
los
it was a
demócratas.
victory for
También fue un
Democrats,
gran
but
día
it was
en
also a
América.
great
¿Por qué
day in
despertaron
America.
tantas razones y pasiones estas elecciones de medio término? ¿Qué
These
margen de
midterm
libertad tendrá ahora Donald Trump para gobernar los próximos 2
elections
años?
will
¿Cómo perfila este
stop Donald Trump in the
resultado la carrera electoral de
next
cara a las
2
próximas
years, and what
presidenciales en
will
Estados
we
Unidos?
expect
El análisis
for
en
these 2
Jugada
years?
Titular.
This is our analysis today.
Lo cierto es que
The
cambió
truth
el
is
mapa
that the
político en
political
Estados
map
Unidos
changed
con
in the
un
United
Congreso
States with
dividido entre
divided
demócratas y
Congress between
republicanos.
Democrats
Tras
and
una jornada electoral
Republicans.
con récord de participación para unas elecciones de medio término, los demócratas capitalizaron el entusiasmo de mujeres y jóvenes,
And
obteniendo
young
dividendos
people
de
obtained
su
in elections,
oleada de feminismo
midterm
rosa,
elections.
desplegada en
Democrats
medios y figuras
capitalized the
prominentes
enthusiasm of
afines al
women
establishment.
and
Tanto así que fueron electas las primeras 2 congresistas de
youngsters.
origen indígena, las 2 primeras legisladoras musulmanas y un legislador demócrata. Se convirtió también en el primer hombre abiertamente gay en ganar la gobernación de Colorado. Mientras tanto,
It's the first time an openly gay man has won the governance of Colorado.
Americanos republicanos en carrera electoral, 2 fueron derrotados. La tolda demócrata contó con el entusiasmo de votantes hispanos.
Todos podemos vivir en Estados Unidos como lo que somos, ciudadanos americanos, y que las leyes se respeten. Nosotros necesitamos que también el voto de nosotros es importante porque nosotros somos igualitos que los demás. No tenemos ningún tipo de
We don't have any kind of.
contribuimos a este país, tanto como los americanos. Y también nosotros lo somos porque aquí hay que
We are equal.
Se está enfocando en cosas equivocadas. En
I
especial,
think we are wrong, especially.
a este país a trabajar duro.
Hay que seguir haciendo lo que
We
podamos.
have to continue doing what we can
Seguir adelante y luchando por todo.
and continue struggling for all of us.
De la agenda de Trump, particularmente la agenda de odio, de xenofobia, de racismo, de falta de justicia social.
Hay muchas imperfecciones.
There are many imperfections in democracy. There are many ways of exhibiting
a las minorías y a la gente de bajos recursos en esta democracia. Por ejemplo, uno de los temas centrales es porque se vota
the central topics why there are many labor problems at present.
El presidente de esta nación, Donald Trump, tras celebrar la jornada como un triunfo, aprovechó para advertir a los demócratas
They
sobre el
want
panorama
the
político del
Democrats.
Si los demócratas piensan
If
que van
the
a
Democrats
desperdiciar
think
dinero
that they will,
investigándonos a nivel de la Cámara de
if the Democrats think that they will waste their money with the taxpayers by investigating at the Chamber of Representative level, we will also be obliged to consider the possibility of investigating them for all filtrations of classified information and much more at Senate level. The dispute for the House of Representatives, Democrats recovered the majority after 8 years of Republican domain by Donald Trump. Nevertheless, until November 6th of 2018, the Republican Party represented the majority both in the Senate as in the House of Representatives and the Congress. Of 435 seats, 219 seats were required, and the Democrat Party reached for 50.3, while the Republican Party obtained 193 seats. They also renewed 135, 35 out of 100 seats. The Republican Party obtained 52 seats, and Democratic Party 45 seats. There are still seats to be decided. This is the governorship of 50 states. 90 million people were enabled to vote, of which 7.8 million Latin people, 6.9% in relation to the other midterm elections. There were more participants. Only the early voting was above 38 million voters. Let's review what the media say in their digital webpage, and let's go to BBC. Elections in the United States. 6 historic winnings for a minority in midterm elections. These are Democrats pertaining to a minority that won the elections to which they were participating. One Latin woman became the youngest woman in history. That represents a new generation. Also, other 2 legislators became the first Muslim women in reaching the capital. This Tuesday, the first openly gay governor elected by the state of Colorado. And the first time in history, 2 native indigenous women went to the lower house. We will now recommend an article of La Vanguardia, Spanish journal, where under the title, Trump loses but also wins. As he had insisted, these midterm elections were a referendum against on his administration, and he once again lost popular vote, although he won presidency. The Democrats, since January, will build a wall against white supremacy of President, his xenophobia, protectionism, and anti-liberalism. Democrats will also be able to fill the White House with all kinds of demands for Trump to make public his income statements or explain his electoral campaign in 2016 with the Kremlin. Nevertheless, Trump also wins because Republicans are more in the Senate and are able to contain the legislative proposals of the Democrats. And we will now go with our correspondent, Alina Duarte, in Washington. Alina, let us know the results to this moment. Hello. As you said, these speculations that we have listened for several days, even 1 week before elections, foresaw that the Chamber of Representatives, after 8 years, will finally have a Democrat majority, and this is what happened. And the Senate would be in Republican hands. It's difficult to follow 435 seats of the House of Representatives, but as you mentioned, the social movements or the media and progressive movements talk about several of these. As you mentioned, there are 2 indigenous candidates. who are now the first two Native American women in reaching Congress. Democrat Rashida Tlaib, who is a U.S. Palestinian woman, that together with another Muslim woman are also the first Muslim women in Congress. Hila Guyard arrived from Somalia as a refugee and now is one of the two candidates that reached Congress. And the press also talks about the new Colorado governor, who has become the first openly gay homosexual in Colorado. And several other candidates are looking the possibility of a Afro-American Democrat reach the seat from Florida, which was not possible. Until now, it is also important to point out that this, unfortunately, does not break the bi-party logic in the United States. It's the first time, nevertheless, that more than 100 women are elected for Congress. This will not influence the agenda of the U.S. foreign affairs agenda, because they will not know if they will break with U.S. war policy. There is also doubt about migration policy because while Donald Trump has caused many outrages with the topic of migration, especially the last days before the elections, when he deployed more than 15,000 soldiers to the border with Mexico. This policy has also been used by Democrats in their favor against Democrats, but we must remember that during Barack Obama, 2.5 million people were deported. So we see this bi-party policy continue, and that has no change in international relations. We must also remember that Donald Trump has insisted on the possibility of an interference by China, by Russia in these elections. Nevertheless, in the last 2 years, 18 brands have been related to Donald Trump and Ivanka, according to Chinese sources. And we see conflicts of interest with the White House. We will see how these last seats are confirmed, but we must remember that they also voted amendments. For in the case of Florida, they will the right to vote should be returned to many people who are in jail. They will now vote again after these midterm elections in the United States. Alina, you have been witness of all this electoral campaign and the participation during this Tuesday. What has been behind everything, all this enthusiasm? These elections called around 40% of voters, but this time people went massively to vote. Trump himself, early in the morning, was saying that these would be quite participative elections and call people to vote. Yes, anticipated elections had even exceeded the elections of 2014, and 50 millions and a half people which went to vote, and we were waiting early morning, even before they were open, 7 o'clock in the morning here in Washington, and the rows were huge. Talking to the people, the common denominator was the fact of voting against Donald Trump's administration. Now, this is an atypical panorama because this is is a Democrat city where Republicans have no place. So there was a feeling of voting against the 2 years of Donald Trump's administration, where Democrats showed their opposition in Congress, and it was very difficult to take away the no vote from Republicans, but the people felt it and expressed this way. Analysts say that this is a punishment vote. Also, Hispanic participation, a group that has been most violated in this administration, 2 years. So they didn't doubt minorities went out to vote. There were several organizations, LGBT, for example, made a clear call to vote, which can be seen on the percentage of votes. So this is what we saw yesterday. Alina, and what level of participation did Donald Trump, who participated in 11 campaign meetings, and something unprecedented, the participation of former President Barack Obama, who publicly supported some of the Democrat candidates. Many celebrities also came out to support Democrats in this campaign. Yes, they were speculating on the role of Hillary Clinton, who clearly lost and has lost support, who went to a social democrat way conducted by Bernie Sanders. So there were differences on who supported and who didn't, but the media took this, never saw before that a former president lead the Democrat campaign to help his party in this elections against Donald Trump. Donald Trump made 5 events to call Republicans to vote, and in many states he said that he couldn't support all, but he made a difference, as Barack Obama did as well. That went to places like Florida, where the support was massive, and the Democrat group had grown. That was undoubted. There was a large possibility of the Democrats winning in Florida, although this did not happen in the last minute. Democrats and Republicans have been conducted by Barack Obama and Donald Trump, respectively. Thank you, Alina, for your explanations. We will make a pause, but when we come back, we will ask if the United States is assisting to legislative stagnation due to political polarization. We will have the answers when we come back.
Seguimos revisando portales,
reviewing web pages of international agencies, and we see how what Latin America agency Prensa Latina says under the title Uncertain Panorama of the United States After Elections. The majority in the House of Representatives of the Blue and an increase of Donald Trump's forces. This showed that there were no winners and losers in this Tuesday. In theory, Democrats will have the power of establishing the agenda, but they will continue competing with a leader of Republican Senate.
Y ahora, ¿qué
And now, what
implications
implications do the results of midterm elections represent for a U.S. president? Let's
Desde mediados del
Since
siglo XIX, el
the mid
partido
of
gobernante en
the
Estados
19th
Unidos
century, the
pierde un
governing
promedio de
party in the
32
United
curules en
States
la Casa de
loses
los
an average of
Representantes y 2 en
32
el
seats
Senado en cada
in the
elección de mitad
House
de
of
mandato.
Representatives
En las
and
últimas
2
elecciones
in
de
the
este tipo
Senate
celebradas en
in each mandate
2014, los
elections.
republicanos
In
obtuvieron el control
2014,
del Senado y
Republicans
alcanzaron la
obtained
mayoría
control
histórica en
of
el número de
Senate and reached a
representantes,
historic
todo mientras
majority
el
in the
demócrata Barack
seats,
Obama
while
fungía como
Barack Obama
presidente.
was president.
Hasta las elecciones de medio
Until
término
the
de
midterm
noviembre de
elections of
2018,
November
la tabla roja
2018,
controlaba ambas
the
cámaras
red
dentro del
seats
Congreso
controlled
estadounidense,
the
una situación que cambió tras
situation
la
in
reciente
U.S.
votación.
Congress, which
Este
changed in these
2018 el
elections.
resultado de las
In
elecciones es
2018, the
determinante y
elections
las votaciones fueron
result is
presentadas y asumidas
definitive,
por la población como
and
un
the people
plebiscito de las
assumed these
políticas de
elections
gobierno del
as a
actual presidente
plebiscite
Donald
against
Trump. ¿Qué implicaciones
Donald
a
Trump's
contracorriente
administration.
representaban estos
What
resultados? Los
concurrent
congresistas bien podrían iniciar
results,
investigaciones sobre sus
Congress
negocios
could
o
start
impulsar un proceso
investigations
de
on their
destitución,
businesses
impeachment,
or
del
start an
presidente en función,
impeachment
producto de los
against
resultados de una
the
investigación de la
president in
presunta
office
injerencia de
after an
Rusia en las elecciones de
investigation of the alleged
2016, aunque
interference
carecerían de
of
los
Russia in
2/3 del
26
Senado necesarios
elections,
para
although
confirmar
they
ese
lack
cese. Sin embargo,
two-thirds of
ningún
the Senate to
representante de la
confirm
tolda
this.
demócrata habló en campaña
Nevertheless,
electoral
no
de contemplar esta acción.
Democrat
El consenso entre dos
considered
partidos
this
para perpetuar
action.
la democracia, lo
The
estadounidense, parece
actions
estar por
to
encima de todo.
consider this U.S. Seems to be above all.
Y analizamos la jugada crítica
We
de hoy
analyze our
desde
critical
México
move
con
from
Eduardo
Mexico
Rosales,
with Eduardo
investigador de la
Rosales, a
Universidad
researcher
Autónoma
of the
de
Autonomous
México y de
University
Nueva
of
York en
Mexico,
Estados
and
Unidos,
from New York
con
in the United
Manolo
States
Muñoz, miembro
with
de la
Manolo Muñoz,
organización
member
Trayvon
of
Martin.
Trayvon
Bienvenidos
Martin.
a Telesur.
Welcome to
Y,
Telesur.
primero, conversamos
First,
con
we will
Eduardo
talk
y le
with
preguntamos, decía
Eduardo,
Donald Trump
and
muy
I will
temprano en
ask
la
you.
mañana
Donald Trump
de
said
este
early in the
martes
morning
que las
today
elecciones en
that
medio
midterm
término
elections
habitualmente
usually
eran unas jornadas muy
were a
aburridas,
very
pero la de este
boring
martes sería,
journey, but that
candente.
these
¿Qué
elections
habría
would be
detrás de
hot. So what
este
do you
entusiasmo
think
que
is
despertaron
behind this
en esta oportunidad las
enthusiasm
elecciones de medio término?
that the midterm elections created? I think there would be three things to say. In the first place, the first, these were the results were completely expected as we saw the news. The first midterm election really loses the majority in Congress by the president's party. Second, I think that this controversial figure of Donald Trump promoted, incentivized the vote of his fans, but also his opponents, which is reflected in the historic participation in these midterm elections, which was around 35% and now exceeded 50% of the electoral voters. Now, a third reflection is youngsters and minorities. We could say that they are starting to be a more participative and active population, and this is reflected in two candidates, one from Minnesota and the other woman candidate from Michigan, both Democrats and Muslim candidates, and their arrival to the House of Representatives of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez from New York that is only 28 years old. And this means that it is highly likely that the next legislation, Democrats, of course, will take control in the House of Representatives, and what will happen is slight changes in internal policy, slight changes that, of course, will be reflected first, and that will try to mine Donald Trump's territory towards presidential elections of 2020. Also, Democrats will try to deviate the initiatives that Trump submits, presents to Congress, and some draft laws, large projects in economic terms, like infrastructure that Donald Trump has in mind and is famous wall, I believe, will be forgotten. They could even the famous free trade agreement, its version 2 USMCA or TEMEC could not be approved, not because it's not favorable to the United States, but to put rocks on the road of Donald Trump. Now, in what concerns foreign policy, I think that things will not change much because the Senate continues under Republican control. Nationalism, isolation, and racism continue present. In your analysis, I would like to focus after your analysis, I would like to focus to New York with the so-called Trump effect, with Mariano. As Eduardo said before, I would like to ask you, Trump called his fans and opponents also. How did people mobilize, for example, the youth, Hispanic vote, women? What message did these minorities send to President Trump?
Sí, bueno, más allá, ¿no? de este sistema que tiene solamente dos partidos.
Well, beyond this bi-party system, we are seeing that grassroots people are in a situation where these people has created a new normal. Democrats and Republicans have many differences, but it's like a corporate party divided in Republicans and more conservatives and Democrats more liberals. In this political panorama, they have things are so bad with the rise of fascism, nationalism that never died in this country, in racism. So when capitalism is in crisis, fascism arises as a response to capitalism in crisis. When there are other currents, a socialist or a third party threatens the bi-party system where Donald Trump arises and this fascism we have now present. They create the new normal. In past elections, there are many more independent votes, and now we have seen that people didn't have any other option than to vote for Democrats or fascism. So both Democrats and Republicans create a new normal. We have no other option to vote for Democrats that will not bring anything new, or well, they will just present another face, but there will not be any essential change in society. Mariano, how, as was said before the elections, how is this Tuesday a thermometer or some kind of plebiscite or referendum on Trump's administration? Yes, it's been an awakening of voters of both sides, super conservative Republicans, and also liberal Democrats who have come to vote because I think we've seen a little more activity, but we are concerned beyond Democrats and Republicans that they're eliminating the third way. The magic, the most important winning of these elections for both parties is to convince the people that there is no other way, no other option to development, and no other way for this society than Republican or Democrat. And that, for me, is much more important. We will see changes in the House of Representatives. Perhaps they will
seguro
pass
médico,
the
y
medical
quizás
insurance and
puedan
perhaps
comenzar los trámites para remover,
they
para
will
no
start the
remover al
process
presidente, lo utilizan el impeachment,
of the
no va a fluir,
impeachment,
se va a quedar estancado en el Senado, va a ser
or
algo
perhaps it
simbólico,
will
pero
remain in the
lo más
Senate as a
preocupante para nosotros,
symbolic
la gente de base,
action,
los
but
adultos trabajadores
on
que están trabajando
grassroots
desde hace muchos años en
or
esto, es
organizations
que
that have
estamos en
been
una situación
working
que estamos ya
on
tan
this
tirados a la derecha
for so many
que
years feel that we are so to the right that even progressive radicals have been forced to vote for a Democrat yesterday to counteract against fascism.
Si me permite, le preguntamos ahora también
I
a
would
Eduardo
now like to
Rosales
ask
en México
Eduardo
sobre este
in
tema.
Mexico.
Nos decía Mariano que
Mariano was saying
todo está
that
muy a la derecha, sin
everything
embargo,
is
usted
to
mencionaba
the right.
anteriormente
Nevertheless, you mentioned
la
before
aparición de
the
nuevos
appearance
actores
of new
políticos,
political
como por ejemplo esta
actors
joven de
like
29 años por Nueva York que llega
this
al
young woman,
Congreso
29 years old,
en las
that
filas,
reached
entre
Congress
comillas, adepta a las filas socialistas como se ha dicho,
as a socialist. So, what do these new political actors mean or represent that somehow challenge the U.S. establishment? I think we should consider that will be formal changes and not content, and the progress of these more progressive streams will be gradual, and perhaps we will see some result, but in the long term. For example, inside the Democrat Party, there are significant progressive expressions, we must acknowledge that, such as Bernie Sanders, that once again obtained a seat for Vermont. And we have interesting moves like Elizabeth Warren that are very critical of the Republican ultra, very critical to the Republican ultra right wing. These Muslim Democrats like this lady Alexandria is a little more tolerant to migration. But I repeat, these changes, we will see these changes perhaps in the midterm, because it is true that ultra-right movements are very well established among Republicans. The fact that Republicans command the Senate and the Democrats the House of Representatives will divide the government, and shows the polarization in the social and political arenas. And what we're going to see also is a legislative paralysis. We must anticipate this and have it very clear. Perhaps it would be the most unproductive legislation of the U.S. history. This is a theory I have. We must also consider that parties are also divided without defined leaderships. There is, in the Republican Party, there's perhaps Ted Cruz that has a seat in the Senate by Texas. That's another current with Marco Rubio. Historic leaders like Bush. There is no leadership. And the Democrats, they also see a fracture between currents as Sanders and Warren, but more center-focused currents like Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, and Barack Obama. So what we are looking at is a polarization at all political and social levels. and of course in political parties. So I also rescue the comment of my colleague Manolo in the sense that the U.S. electoral system is obsolete. It is a heterogeneous, complex system, and especially when presidential elections arrive, it is an indirect vote that is no longer that is outdated. On the other hand, I think that both the alternatives of Democrats and Republicans no longer cover the spectrum in such a diverse society. Thank you, Professor. We will go back to Mariano to learn his opinion on how the results of these elections will have an impact on the remaining period of Trump in the White House. Well, we're going to see much more campaigns. At least in history, Donald Trump started his presidential campaign since he went to the White House. This is something new because of presidents didn't talk about their re-elections at least 2 years after being in office. This guy started making a campaign for his next elections a few months after he was elected. And so Trump loves to make its multitudinary meetings, but people support them, and we will see in these 2 years campaigns of the president for his re-election. And as Eduardo said, there is no viable alternative for the Republicans, and worse yet for the Democrats. Eduardo was mentioning Bernie Sanders. Yes, with his socialist reform, we saw what happened when he was about to win. He was nominated to represent the presidency of the Democrat Party. There was he was deceived for Hillary Clinton. Clinton has a multi-millionaire expert campaign and played it dirty against Bernie Sanders. Perhaps if Bernie Sanders would have been a candidate, we could have had him as president instead of Trump. But we know that the great high corporate elites didn't even allow a Democrat independent candidate to go through. So I don't see much changes in this sense. What I do see is that society is becoming polarized at this time. They are playing with the fear and nationalism of people, fear to migrants, to the caravans coming from the south. These are lies. We know that migration through the southern border is dropping. Nevertheless, the newspapers here or the media here say the contrary, and this is to activate this racist, nationalist base that believe that money and resources are going to the hands of migrants and minorities. As we all know, this is not at all true. Resources and money are still in the hand of corporate elites, both Republican and Democrat. We're going to see much of the same. As Eduardo said, we have some hope. Nevertheless, what we need now is the arisal of another way. forgetting the corporate way, the bi-party corporate way. And we need to go upwards at the local level, regional, state, and federal level.
Gracias, Mariano Muñoz, por
Thank you,
estas
Mariano,
declaraciones, por sus
for your
análisis,
declarations
también,
and
por su
analysis,
tiempo. Lo propio
and
para
your time.
Eduardo,
The same for Eduardo
desde la
Morales
ciudad,
from
de México.
Mexico
Ahora
City.
hacemos una pausa, pero al regreso
We will
estaremos
now make a
analizando
pause,
en
but
qué
when we come
medida
back, we will analyze
el resultado de esta elección de medio
how the
término
result of this
afectaría la
midterm
gobernabilidad
election
en
would
los
affect
Estados
the
Unidos
governance
y
of the
cómo
United
apunta
States,
este panorama
and
de
how this
cara a las
panorama is
próximas
seen
presidenciales en las
for
que
the
Donald
next
Trump
presidential
aspira también a
elections, where
reelegirse.
Donald Trump also aspires to be a candidate.
Aunque las elecciones
Even
de
if
medio término
midterm
o mitad de periodo son
elections
una
are an
oportunidad, para
opportunity
conocer el sistema
to
legislativo
learn about
estadounidense,
the U.S.
es importante
legislative
también conocer
system,
las
it's also
atribuciones
important
de este
to
sistema.
know the features of the system.
La Cámara y el Senado tienen
The
casi el mismo
chamber,
poder.
the House and
Ambas
Senate
trabajan
have
en
almost the
conjunto en la
same power.
elaboración y
They work
aprobación de
together
leyes
to
federales. Y el Senado
develop
tiene
and
además
approve
la
federal laws,
potestad
and the
de
Senate
confirmar a
has the
jueces y
power to
funcionarios al
confirm
frente de
judges and
instituciones del Estado.
officials
Sin
in
embargo,
state
sus medios de elección
entities.
son muy
Nevertheless,
distintos.
their
Los
election means
fundadores
are
de la
very
nación
different.
estadounidense
The
desearon que los
founders of the
miembros de la
U.S.
Cámara de
nation decided
Representantes
that the House of
estuvieran cerca del público para
Representatives be
expresar los
close to the
deseos y
public
las
to
ambiciones de
listen to
este.
their desires
Por
and
eso los fundadores
ambitions.
planearon una
This
Cámara
is why the
relativamente
founders
numerosa
planned
que
a
incluyera muchos miembros de
relatively
distritos legislativos pequeños
big
y elecciones frecuentes
chamber
cada
and
2
frequent
años.
elections
Cada
every 2
escaño de la
years.
Cámara representa un
Every
electorado
seat of the
geográfico
chamber
único, es
represents a
decir, cada
unique
miembro es elegido como único
geographic
representante de
voters.
ese
Each
distrito
member
según la
is
regla de
elected
pluralidad.
as
Cada uno
representative
de los
of
50
that
estados tiene
district.
asegurado por lo menos
Each
un
of the
asiento en la
50
Cámara
states
y los
have at
demás
least
escaños
one
son
seat,
asignados a los
and the
estados
rest
según
of
su
seats
población.
assigned
Alaska, por
to
ejemplo, tiene muy
the
poca
states according
población y por
to
lo
the
tanto solo tiene un
population.
asiento en la
Alaska,
Cámara.
for example, only has one
California es el
seat.
estado más poblado y cuenta
California
con
is
53
the
escaños.
most populated,
Después
so
de
it
cada
has
censo
3
decenal,
seats.
el número de
Every
escaños que
10
se asigna a
years,
un
the
estado
number
se
of
vuelve a
seats
calcular para tomar en
appointed to a
cuenta los
year
cambios
is
registrados en su
recalculated to
población
see
durante los últimos
the
10 años
changes in
anteriores. Y las
population in
legislaturas
10
estatales
years.
modifican los límites de los distritos del
And
Congreso
state
dentro del estado
legislations
para reflejar
modify
los cambios registrados en
Congress
el número de
in the
asientos
state.
asignados a esa
The
entidad
decennial
o los
census will
cambios
define who will
demográficos en la
occupy
misma.
the
El
remaining
Senado fue
seats. The
diseñado de
Senate
modo
was
que sus
designed
miembros
in a way in
representan
which
un
they can
electorado
represent a
numeroso,
large
el
number
de
of
todo el
voters,
estado. Y
the
para que
total
cada estado
state,
tenga la misma
and for each
representación
state
en
to
ese
have the same
órgano, sin
representation
importar
in
cuál
that
sea su
entity,
población. Así, los estados pequeños
regardless of
tienen
its
tanta influencia
population.
en el
Therefore,
Senado como
small
los
states
estados
have
grandes.
the same
Al
influence in
principio,
the Senate
los senadores eran
as
seleccionados
the
por las
large
legislaturas
states.
estatales.
The
No fue
beginning,
sino hasta la promulgación de la
it was
séptima
not
enmienda a la
until the
Constitución
issuance
en
of the Seventh
1913
Amendment of the
cuando los senadores
Constitution.
empezaron a ser elegidos directamente por los votantes de sus estados. Cada
In
estado tiene 2 senadores
1913,
elegidos para
when
servir en periodos
they were
escalonados
elected
de
by
6
their
años,
states.
y un tercio de los asientos
In
del Senado son
1913,
objeto de
started to be
reelección
elected by
cada 2
voters
años.
of the respective
Cada senador es
states.
escogido por
Each
pluralidad de
senator is
votos
chosen
del
by
electorado de su
plurality of
estado.
votes of their state.
Y en este segmento de nuestra jugada
In
nos
this
acompaña el
segment,
doctor
we have
Jesús
with us
David
Dr.
Rojas
Jesus David Rojas
Él es
Hernández,
docente universitario,
who is
también
a
analista.
university
Bienvenido,
teacher
profesor, a
and
Jugada,
analyst. Welcome
Crítica,
to
y en
Critical
el
Move.
análisis que hemos hecho hasta ahora en
Our
el
analysis
programa,
until
resalta
now
como una de las conclusiones el hecho, nos decían los
has
analistas
as one of the
anteriores, que
conclusions
estamos
that
frente a un sistema
we are
político
in a
un tanto
political
agotado ya, a pesar incluso de que
exhausted
acceden
system,
a
even
la
if
palestra legislativa
that
nuevas figuras políticas que
even if
desafían
new
de algún modo el
faces
establishment estadounidense.
somehow
¿Cuál es su lectura
challenge
de
the
este
U.S.
Primero,
establishment.
gracias
What is your
Rolando,
opinion?
gracias al personal que está
Thank
aquí
you,
por esta-
Rolando,
esta
and the staff
oportunidad.
here for this
En
opportunity.
principio, es un
In
sistema que está agotado
principle,
y
the
necesita
system needs
auxilio para recrearse y
help to
reformularse.
recreate and
Pero yo veo
reformulate
distinto a lo
itself.
que decían los
But
analistas anteriores, que aquí hay un
unlike the
gran
former
vencedor
analyst, I
del lado
see
del Partido
there
Demócrata,
is
que es
a
el
great
presidente
winner,
Obama.
former
El
President
presidente
Obama. I think that President Obama, the troika formed between Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, President Obama was broken due to the direct and massive participation of President Obama in the House of Representatives. On the other hand, the division remains in the Republican Party. Therefore, I see Trump's election difficult because the division in the Republican Party will continue. On the other hand, the northern part showed preference for the Democrats, and the South, especially because of the march from Honduras, became more radical. And even if there are people who deem that Trump is the most radical the United States has had, it seems that there is no more radical. In that march of more than 15,000 soldiers to the border, they are also transferring paramilitary forces against these migrants. 15,000 soldiers plus paramilitary forces like farmers, peasants living in the South United States. We saw President Barack Obama participating in these elections as no other president had done. What is behind this? In a panorama where there's a strong political polarization. And how could this polarization affect Trump's governance in the following period? We could say that President Trump has been the antithesis of President Obama. He reported the agreement with Iran that President Obama had done. Democrats were happy with nuclear weapon control agreements, and President Trump just rejected these treaties. The relation with Great Britain, after the breakfast, Great Britain was looking at the United States, and President Trump left him alone, and in Great Britain there is the possibility of going back to European Union or make a new referendum to ask the people. So, President Trump has made the world mistrust U.S. work. But in the legislative scenario, how will these forces be handled when Democrats talk, for example, of calling Donald Trump's officials to respond the agreement with Iran, North Korea, and as President Donald Trump said, they will not spend the money of taxpayers in that kind of situation. Let's remember that the U.S. system, in the U.S. system, the budget is approved by Congress. If Congress will approve Congress, the House of Representatives will say how it will be spent and how much for research. So numbers are not enough to make an impeachment because the Senate is still Republican. But let's remember that this division in the Republican Party showed that not everyone is faithful to President Trump. There are situations that may appear and could even make Republicans fear for the safety of the United States. They should start working with this because it's not only about making laws, it's about the amount of international activities of President Trump and the damages.
Pero ese nuevo contrapeso que tiene hoy la Cámara de Representantes y el Senado, ¿en qué medida podría influir, por ejemplo, en la política exterior de Estados Unidos, que ha estado asignado durante este periodo de Donald Trump por sus intereses personales, por su manera de manejar? Pero podría cambiar este contrapeso.
Yo creo que sí, porque las personas que están entrando el hecho de que haya dos pueblos, dos miembros de
The
los
fact
pueblos
that there are
originarios,
two
dos
members of
musulmanes que
the
además son damas,
Native
tienen una perspectiva
Americans,
diferente
two
a nosotros los caballeros,
Muslim women who have a different
está hablando
perspective
de
than
que
men,
el baby,
tell
la
us
explosión
that
del
the
baby
baby
boomer
boomer
que se hizo
made
cuando
with
ganó la primera vez,
President Clinton when he
pudiese
won
estar
the first time
llegando a ser
could
sustituida por
be
una clase
replaced
más
now
joven
for a
que está
younger
abierta a los
class
cambios y a la
open to
evolución liberal
changes
de la
and
sociedad.
liberal
Y que a pesar de que
evolution of society.
Hillary Clinton o el presidente Trump mantienen esa rigidez
Although Hillary
conservadora,
Clinton
ellos
and
están
Trump
abriendo paso para que las
keep these
libertades se expresen.
conservative
Eso pudiese ser que no solamente
position,
se
they
hable
are
de las
giving way
situaciones
to
de
more
los Estados
liberal.
Unidos,
This could lead
por ejemplo, la situación
also open the
en
doors to
África,
talk
en
about
Irán o en otros lugares, sino
the
que esas
U.S.
situaciones
not
pudiesen
only in
estar viendo los norteamericanos que se está
Africa,
pasando
Asia,
algo
and other
dentro del territorio
places, but
Llama la
also
atención,
inside the
profesor,
United
y por ahí
States.
comenzábamos el
It calls our
análisis hoy
attention
de que luego de este
that
resultado,
after
tanto
this
demócratas como
result, both
republicanos se
Democrats
declaran
and
vencedores. También los
Republicans
analistas hoy
are
hablan de
winners.
vencidos.
Analysts also
si nos
talk
vamos, por
about
ejemplo,
winners
al
and losers, but if we
terreno
talk
de la
about
Florida, de los tres
Florida, of the three Cuban
manejaron
American
en su discurso de campaña
candidates
el tema
that
Cuba, el
handled
tema
the topic of
Venezuela, el
Cuba,
propio Donald Trump
Venezuela,
acusaba a los
Donald Trump
demócratas
himself
de
was
que
accusing
convertirían
Democrats
la
that
aspiración
of
socialista en
turning
una
the
Venezuela
socialist aspiration in
a los
Venezuela
estados donde los demócratas
to the states
disputaban
where
el cargo de
Democrats
gobernador.
disputed the
¿Cuál es el
governor
escenario? ¿Quiénes
position.
ganan?
Who
¿Quiénes
win, who
Yo creo
lose.
que inclusive
I think that
ese ala radical del
even
estado de
this
Florida
radical wing of the
tenido
Florida
un
state
sensible
has had
respuesta
the
de la gente
sensitive
joven de
response
Florida.
of young
O sea,
people
yo creo
of
que la
Florida.
gente joven está
I think
manejando la
that
agenda
the
del
young
futuro
people
de
are
los Estados
handling
Unidos.
the agenda
De
for
estos
the
2
future of the
años
United States of these
las
2
elecciones de
years
reelección y
and the
después,
re-election
porque está
elections
siendo
and later.
sustituida
Because
los baby boomers, que eran una
baby
realidad totalmente
boomers are
distinta de
being
Guerra Fría.
replaced. It was a
Ahora la
completely
Guerra
different
Fría no está
reality
asignada
of the
ya por
Cold
tanto por
War.
la
The
situación
Cold War is no
ideológica, sino
longer
por la situación
told
económica.
about
Se han visto
ideological
afectadas
situation,
muchas
but
empresas,
economic
por las
situation. Many
sanciones
companies
contra
have
Rusia y
been
contra China.
affected
En el
because
ámbito
of the
económico, los
sanctions
Estados
against
Unidos
China and
no están
Russia.
tan bien
Economically, the
como
United
aparentan.
States
La industria
is not
manufacturera
as well as they
norteamericana
appear
también
to
ha
be.
bajado en
The U.S.
calidad
industry
respecto a la
quality
rusa,
has
a la
also
rusa.
Sin embargo,
Esas son
muchos-
situaciones que tampoco vamos a decir que los demócratas son unos
We're not going to say that
unos
Democrats are
ángeles, pero
angels,
tienen una
but
política normalmente más de protección
usually
a la
their
población
policy
norteamericana que
protects
afuera.
Sin embargo,
U.S.
el
citizens
presidente
more
Donald
than
Trump tiene
Nevertheless,
una importante
President
base
Donald
de
Trump has an
apoyo que celebra
important
incluso
support
el estado de la economía hoy en Estados
that
Unidos, aunque en este tipo de
celebrates
elecciones
the conditions
no
of
sea
the
un
U.S.
factor
economy.
determinante.
No es un factor determinante porque se ha
It is not a
inoculado el
determinant
odio
factor
contra la
because
inmigración y
hatred
contra el
against
estilo de vida de los
migration
Estados
has been
Unidos. Pero
inoculated.
si los
But
inmigrantes que
if
están
migrants
marchando
who are
decidieran
marching
no marchar
decide
más a los
not to
Estados Unidos,
march
la economía
more to the
cae.
United States, the
Porque
U.S.
la mano de
economy
obra
would
que utilizan
fall
los inmigrantes
because
latinoamericanos no lo hacen los ciudadanos norteamericanos.
these jobs are not done by U.S. citizens, like harvesting. And besides, when you describe Latin American economies
de todos los males de su
and
país a una población que ha venido a trabajar a los Estados Unidos es una mala señal, sobre todo porque
talk
primera vez
against
asume el
migrants,
presidente
this
una
is a
persona
bad signal
con un
because
signo totalmente distinto
they are
en
electing in Mexico somebody that is completely different. How will President López Obrador assume? Is a great question. Thank you, Professor, for your time and reflections. Undoubtedly, Democrats have blocked Donald Trump with the results of the midterm elections in the United States. Everything shows that the legislative agenda and the president's agenda will polarize the country, will still polarize the country, but with Democrats controlling the House of Representatives to promote drafts, start impeachments, and manage power, will be a change without the conduction of 8 years in this instance. With the arrival of new politicians who are challenging the establishment, unprecedented participation in the midterm elections sends a message against the current U.S. administration that Donald Trump should revise if he wants to remain in the White House in the next presidential elections.